The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the small, crumbling village of Eldermere. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and the faint tang of smoke from distant hearths. In a modest cottage at the edge of the village, a woman sat by the fire, her hands trembling as she stitched a torn shirt. Her name was Leora, and she was a widow with 2 young children to feed. Leora's husband, Garrick, had been a blacksmith, a man of strength and skill. But when the fever swept through the village 2 winters ago, it took him along with a dozen others. Since then, Leora had struggled to keep her family afloat. She took in mending, sold what little she could from their garden, and even begged for scraps when the nights grew too cold and the pantry too empty. But it was never enough. Her children, Finn and Mira, slept soundly in the corner of the room, their faces pale but peaceful. Leora's heart ached as she watched them. They deserved so much more than this life of hardship. She had tried to find work in the village, but no one would hire her. The men said she was too weak for labor, and the women whispered that she was bad luck, a widow cursed by the gods. Leora clenched her jaw, refusing to let the tears fall. She had no time for self-pity. Tomorrow, she would walk to the nearby town of Brighthaven, where the markets were larger and the opportunities, perhaps, were greater. She had heard rumors of a wealthy merchant who was looking for help. It was a long shot, but she had no other choice. The next morning, Leora rose before dawn. She kissed Finn and Mira on their foreheads, leaving them in the care of a neighbor, and set off on the dusty road to Brighthaven. The journey was grueling, the sun beating down on her as she trudged through the heat. Her feet ached, and her stomach growled with hunger, but she pressed on, driven by the thought of her children's faces. When she finally reached Brighthaven, the town was alive with activity. Merchants shouted their wares, and the streets were crowded with people. Leora made her way to the market square, where she had heard the wealthy merchant, a man named Thaddeus, often conducted his business. She spotted him near a stall of exotic spices, his fine clothes and confident demeanor setting him apart from the crowd. Summoning her courage, Leora approached him. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice trembling. "I heard you were looking for help. I'm willing to work hard, whatever the task." Thaddeus turned to her, his sharp eyes scanning her worn dress and calloused hands. He frowned. "You? What can you do? You look like you can barely lift a sack of flour." Leora's cheeks burned, but she stood her ground. "I may not look like much, sir, but I'm strong. I can sew, cook, clean, and tend to animals. I'll do whatever you need." Thaddeus studied her for a moment, then shrugged. "Fine. I need someone to clean my storerooms. It's hard work, and I won't pay much. If you're up for it, be at my estate at dawn tomorrow." Leora nodded, relief flooding through her. "Thank you, sir. I'll be there." As she walked back to Eldermere, her heart was lighter than it had been in months. She had a chance, however small, to provide for her children. But as she approached the village, she noticed a crowd gathered near her cottage. Her stomach dropped as she quickened her pace. "What's happened?" she asked, pushing through the crowd. Her neighbor, an elderly woman named Hester, turned to her with tears in her eyes. "Oh, Leora, it's Finn. He fell while playing near the river. He's hurt badly." Leora's heart stopped. She rushed into the cottage, where Finn lay on the bed, his leg wrapped in bloodied cloth. Mira sat beside him, her small hand clutching his. Leora knelt beside them, her hands shaking as she examined the wound. "We need a healer," she said, her voice breaking. "But we have no money." Hester placed a hand on her shoulder. "I'll lend you what I can, but it won't be enough." Leora's mind raced. She had no choice. She would have to beg Thaddeus for an advance on her wages. It was a risk, but she had to save her son. The next morning, Leora arrived at Thaddeus's estate, her heart heavy with worry. She explained her situation, her voice trembling as she pleaded for his help. Thaddeus listened, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he sighed. "I'm sorry for your troubles, but I can't give you an advance. You haven't even started working yet. If you want the job, you'll have to earn the money first." Leora's hope crumbled. She had no time to earn the money. Finn needed help now. Desperation clawed at her chest as she turned away, tears streaming down her face. But as she walked through the town, a voice called out to her. "Wait!" She turned to see a man approaching her. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. His clothes were simple but well-made, and he carried himself with an air of quiet strength. "I overheard your conversation," he said. "My name is Elias. I'm a carpenter, and I've been looking for someone to help with my shop. If you're willing to work, I can pay you enough to help your son." Leora stared at him, hardly daring to believe her ears. "Why would you help me?" she asked. Elias smiled. "Because no one should have to suffer alone. Come, let's get your son the help he needs." With that, Leora's life began to change. Elias not only gave her a job but also helped her find a healer for Finn. For the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of hope. But little did she know, this was only the beginning of a journey that would test her strength, her courage, and her faith in humanity. The healer's hut was small but warm, filled with the scent of herbs and the soft glow of candlelight. Leora sat by Finn's side, her hand clasped tightly around his as the healer, a woman named Nara, worked to set his broken leg. Mira sat quietly in the corner, her wide eyes filled with worry. "He'll be fine," Nara said, her voice calm and reassuring. "The bone is set, and with rest, he'll heal. But he'll need care and nourishment." Leora nodded, her throat tight with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you." Nara smiled gently. "You already have. Elias has been a good friend to me, and he speaks highly of you. That's payment enough." Leora's heart swelled with gratitude. Elias had not only given her a job but had also paid for Finn's treatment. She vowed to work harder than ever to repay his kindness. The next morning, Leora arrived at Elias's carpentry shop, her children in tow. The shop was a modest building, but it was filled with the scent of fresh wood and the sound of tools at work. Elias greeted her with a warm smile. "Welcome," he said. "I'll show you around and explain your tasks." As Leora followed him through the shop, she marveled at the craftsmanship of the furniture and tools. Elias was clearly a master of his trade, and his passion for his work was evident in every piece. "Your main job will be to keep the shop clean and organized," Elias explained. "You'll also help with sanding and finishing the wood. It's hard work, but I think you're up to the task." Leora nodded, determination shining in her eyes. "I won't let you down." Over the next few weeks, Leora threw herself into her work. She rose before dawn to clean the shop, sanded wood until her hands were raw, and stayed late to ensure everything was perfect. Elias watched her with admiration, often offering words of encouragement and praise. But it wasn't just her work ethic that impressed him. Leora had a natural talent for woodworking, and she quickly learned the basics of the craft. Elias began teaching her more advanced techniques, and soon she was helping him with intricate carvings and designs. As the days turned into weeks, Leora's confidence grew. She no longer felt like the desperate widow begging for scraps. She was a skilled worker, a valuable member of Elias's team. And for the first time in years, she felt a sense of pride and purpose. But her newfound happiness was not without its challenges. The villagers of Eldermere still whispered about her, their superstitions and prejudices lingering like a dark cloud. Some even accused her of using dark magic to win Elias's favor. One evening, as Leora walked home from the shop, she was confronted by a group of villagers. Their leader, a man named Oren, stepped forward, his eyes filled with malice. "We know what you're doing," he sneered. "You think you can fool us with your tricks? You're cursed, and you'll bring nothing but trouble to this village." Leora's heart pounded, but she stood her ground. "I've done nothing wrong," she said firmly. "I'm just trying to provide for my children." Oren laughed bitterly. "We'll see about that. You'd better watch your back, widow." As the villagers dispersed, Leora felt a chill run down her spine. She knew their threats were not empty. But she refused to let fear dictate her life. She had come too far to give up now. The next day, she confided in Elias, her voice trembling as she recounted the confrontation. Elias listened quietly, his expression darkening with anger. "They're fools," he said. "But you're not alone, Leora. I'll stand by you, no matter what." His words filled her with warmth, but she couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The villagers' hatred was a constant reminder of how fragile her newfound happiness was. One night, as Leora lay in bed, she heard a noise outside her cottage. She crept to the window, her heart pounding, and saw a shadowy figure lurking near the door. Before she could react, the figure threw a torch onto the roof, setting it ablaze. Leora screamed, grabbing Finn and Mira and rushing them outside. The flames spread quickly, consuming the cottage in a matter of minutes. The villagers gathered to watch, their faces filled with a mix of fear and satisfaction. Elias arrived soon after, his face pale with shock. "Leora, are you all right?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. Leora nodded, tears streaming down her face. "We're fine, but the cottage, it's gone." Elias clenched his fists, his eyes blazing with anger. "This has gone too far. I won't let them hurt you anymore." With that, he made a decision that would change their lives forever. He offered Leora and her children a place to stay in his home, a gesture that shocked the villagers and solidified his commitment to her. As Leora settled into Elias's home, she felt a sense of safety and belonging she hadn't known in years. But she also knew that the road ahead would not be easy. The villagers' hatred was a constant threat, and she would have to fight to protect her family. But for the first time, she didn't feel alone. She had Elias by her side, and together, they would face whatever challenges came their way. The days turned into weeks, and Leora and her children settled into their new life at Elias's home. The spacious house was a stark contrast to their tiny, crumbling cottage, and the warmth and kindness Elias showed them made it feel like a true home. Finn's leg healed slowly but steadily, and Mira blossomed under the care and attention of both Leora and Elias. But the peace they found was fragile. The villagers of Eldermere continued to whisper and plot, their resentment growing with each passing day. Oren, the man who had confronted Leora, became the ringleader of a small but vocal group determined to drive her out of the village. One evening, as Leora and Elias sat by the fire, a loud knock echoed through the house. Elias rose to answer the door, his expression wary. Standing outside was a group of villagers, their faces set in grim determination. "What do you want?" Elias asked, his voice firm. Oren stepped forward, his eyes blazing with anger. "We want her gone," he said, pointing at Leora. "She's cursed, and she'll bring nothing but ruin to this village." Elias crossed his arms, his gaze steady. "Leora is under my protection. If you have a problem with her, you'll have to go through me." The villagers hesitated, their confidence wavering under Elias's unwavering resolve. But Oren was not so easily deterred. "You think you can protect her forever?" he sneered. "Mark my words, Elias, this isn't over." With that, the villagers turned and left, their threats hanging heavy in the air. Leora felt a chill run down her spine as she watched them go. "They won't stop," she said quietly. "They'll keep coming until they drive us out." Elias placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll face them together," he said. "But we need to be prepared." The next morning, Elias began fortifying the house, reinforcing the doors and windows and setting up a system of alarms to alert them to any intruders. Leora helped as best she could, her heart heavy with worry but also filled with determination. As the days passed, the tension in the village grew. The villagers' hostility became more overt, and Leora and Elias found themselves constantly on edge. But they refused to back down, their bond growing stronger with each challenge they faced. One night, as a storm raged outside, Leora was awakened by the sound of breaking glass. She sat up, her heart pounding, and saw shadows moving in the darkness. She grabbed Finn and Mira and rushed to Elias's room, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. "Elias, they're here," she whispered, shaking him awake. Elias's eyes snapped open, and he quickly assessed the situation. "Stay here," he said, grabbing a heavy wooden staff. "I'll handle this." Leora nodded, clutching her children tightly as Elias left the room. She heard the sounds of a struggle, the clash of wood against metal, and the shouts of angry men. Her heart raced as she prayed for Elias's safety. After what felt like an eternity, the sounds died down, and Elias returned, his face bruised but triumphant. "They're gone," he said, his voice steady. "But they'll be back. We need to leave." Leora's eyes widened in shock. "Leave? But where will we go?" Elias took her hand, his gaze filled with determination. "There's a town a few days' journey from here. It's larger and more prosperous, and we can start fresh there. We'll take only what we need and leave tonight." Leora hesitated, her mind racing. Leaving the only home she had ever known was a daunting prospect, but she knew they had no other choice. The villagers' hatred was a constant threat, and she couldn't risk her children's safety. With a heavy heart, she nodded. "Let's go." They packed quickly, gathering only the essentials and a few precious belongings. As they stepped out into the stormy night, Leora took one last look at the village that had been both her home and her prison. She felt a pang of sadness but also a glimmer of hope for the future. The journey was grueling, the storm making the roads treacherous and the nights cold and wet. But Leora and Elias pressed on, their determination unwavering. Finn and Mira, though frightened, found comfort in their mother's presence and the kindness of Elias. After several days of travel, they finally reached the town of Silverwood. It was a bustling place, filled with the sounds of laughter and the sights of prosperity. Leora felt a surge of hope as they entered the town, her heart lifting at the thought of a new beginning. Elias found them a small but comfortable inn to stay in while they looked for a more permanent home. As they settled in, Leora felt a sense of relief she hadn't known in years. They were safe, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a glimmer of happiness. But as she looked out the window at the bustling town, she knew that their journey was far from over. They had escaped the hatred of Eldermere, but they still had to build a new life in Silverwood. And with Elias by her side, she felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Silverwood was a town unlike any Leora had ever seen. The streets were lined with bustling shops and lively taverns, and the air was filled with the sounds of merchants hawking their wares and children laughing as they played. It was a place of opportunity, and Leora felt a surge of hope as she and Elias began to settle in. Elias quickly found work at a local carpentry shop, his skills in high demand. Leora, too, began to look for ways to contribute. She took in mending and sewing, her nimble fingers quickly earning her a reputation for quality work. Finn and Mira, though still adjusting to their new surroundings, began to thrive under the care and attention of their mother and Elias. But despite the relative peace they found in Silverwood, Leora couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered in the back of her mind. The memories of Eldermere and the villagers' hatred were still fresh, and she worried that their past would catch up with them. One day, as Leora was returning from the market, she noticed a group of men watching her from a distance. Their eyes were cold and calculating, and she felt a chill run down her spine. She quickened her pace, her heart pounding as she hurried home. When she arrived, she found Elias in the workshop, his hands busy carving an intricate design into a piece of wood. She quickly told him about the men, her voice trembling with fear. Elias's expression darkened, but he remained calm. "We'll be careful," he said. "But we can't let fear dictate our lives. We've come too far to let them take this from us." Leora nodded, but the encounter left her on edge. She began to notice more subtle signs of hostility, whispers behind her back, cold stares from strangers, and the occasional vandalism of their property. It was clear that not everyone in Silverwood welcomed them with open arms. Despite the challenges, Leora and Elias continued to build their new life. They found a small but cozy house on the outskirts of town, and Elias began to take on more ambitious projects, his reputation as a skilled carpenter growing with each piece he created. Leora, too, began to expand her sewing business, her talent and dedication earning her a loyal clientele. But as their lives began to stabilize, a new challenge arose. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Elias turned to Leora with a serious expression. "I've been thinking," he said. "We've been through so much together, and I can't imagine my life without you and the children. I want to make this official. I want to marry you." Leora's heart skipped a beat, her eyes filling with tears. She had never dared to hope for such happiness, and the thought of building a future with Elias filled her with joy. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "Yes, I'll marry you." The wedding was a small but joyous affair, attended by a few close friends and clients who had become like family. As Leora stood beside Elias, her heart swelled with love and gratitude. She had found a partner who stood by her through thick and thin, and together, they had built a life filled with hope and promise. But their happiness was not without its challenges. The hostility from some of the townsfolk continued to simmer beneath the surface, and Leora knew that they would always have to be vigilant. But with Elias by her side, she felt ready to face whatever the future held. As they danced under the stars on their wedding night, Leora felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. She had found love, safety, and a new beginning, and she was determined to cherish every moment of it. Years passed, and Leora and Elias's life in Silverwood continued to flourish. Their small family grew, with the addition of a daughter named Alara, who brought even more joy and laughter into their home. Finn and Mira thrived under the love and guidance of their parents, and Elias's carpentry business became one of the most respected in the town. But as their lives became more stable, Leora never forgot the struggles they had faced. She often thought of the villagers of Eldermere and the hatred that had driven them from their home. Though she had found happiness in Silverwood, she knew that not everyone was as fortunate. One day, as Leora was walking through the market, she noticed a young woman sitting by the side of the road, her face gaunt and her clothes tattered. The woman's eyes were filled with despair, and Leora felt a pang of recognition. She had once been that woman, desperate, alone, and without hope. Without hesitation, Leora approached her. "Are you all right?" she asked gently. The woman looked up, her eyes filled with tears. I have nowhere to go," she whispered. "No one will hire me. I have a child to feed, but I can't find work." Leora's heart ached as she listened to the woman's story. She knew all too well the pain of being rejected and cast aside. Without a second thought, she offered the woman a job at her sewing business, promising to pay her a fair wage and provide a safe place for her and her child to stay. The woman's eyes filled with gratitude, and she thanked Leora profusely. As Leora walked away, she felt a sense of fulfillment she hadn't known before. She had been given a second chance, and now she was able to offer that same chance to someone else. Over time, Leora began to take in more women in need, offering them work and a place to stay. Her sewing business grew, not just in size but in reputation, as people began to recognize the quality and care that went into every piece. But more importantly, it became a place of hope and healing for those who had been cast aside by society. Elias supported her every step of the way, his love and encouragement giving her the strength to continue. Together, they built a legacy of compassion and resilience, a testament to the power of kindness and the human spirit. As the years went by, Leora often reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. She had faced unimaginable hardships, but she had also found love, hope, and a sense of purpose. She had built a life not just for herself, but for her family and for those who had no one else to turn to. And as she looked out over the bustling town of Silverwood, she knew that her story was far from over. There would always be challenges to face and battles to fight, but with Elias by her side and the strength of her own spirit, she was ready to face whatever the future held. For Leora, the widow who had once been cast aside, had found her place in the world. And in doing so, she had become a beacon of hope for others, proving that no matter how dark the night, the dawn would always come.